Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for this special report. Tonight, we are going to walk you through everything, from the warships positioned in the Arabian Sea, to the missile systems pointed across borders, to the university students in Tehran who are taking to the streets even as their government prepares for the possibility of war from the outside. We are going to show you the full picture: military, diplomatic, economic, and human. Because the story here is not just about governments and generals. It is about what happens to a region and to the world when the largest military force on Earth and a government under enormous internal and external pressure find themselves staring at each other across a narrowing space with no clear exit. Let us begin. To understand the gravity of this moment, you first need to understand what the United States has assembled in this region and how unusual it is. The United States Navy has positioned the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group in the Arabian Sea. This is not a ship. This is a floating military base. At its core is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, over 300 meters long, carrying more than 70 aircraft and capable of sustaining continuous air operations for weeks without resupply. Around it, a ring of guided missile destroyers and cruisers provides layered defense against air, surface, and submarine threats. But here is what makes the current situation different from a standard deployment. A second carrier strike group, built around the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built, has been ordered to the region. It was tracked moving through the Strait of Gibraltar and heading east. When military analysts and defense officials speak about one carrier, they describe capability. When they speak about two carriers operating in the same theater, they describe something closer to a campaign-level posture. The difference is not just arithmetic. Two carriers mean continuous air coverage around the clock. They mean the ability to conduct simultaneous operations across multiple targets. They mean the United States does not need to pause, resupply, or rotate out. They mean endurance. And endurance, in military terms, is a message as much as it is a capability. Now let us talk about what is actually on these ships, because the hardware matters. The F/A-18 Super Hornet is the workhorse of American carrier aviation. It is a multi-role strike fighter that can engage enemy aircraft in the air and destroy hardened targets on the ground in the same mission. These aircraft have been used in every major American military operation of the past 2 decades. The F-35C is something different. It is a 5th-generation stealth fighter, meaning it is designed to be nearly invisible to radar. It can penetrate air defense networks that would detect and engage almost any other aircraft. For a mission against Iran, which has invested heavily in ground-based air defenses, the F-35C's ability to move quietly through contested airspace is not a luxury. It is a requirement. The EA-18G Growler is the electronic warfare specialist of the carrier air wing. Its job is to blind enemy radar systems, jam communications, and create confusion in the electromagnetic spectrum, effectively turning off the eyes and ears of an opponent's air defense network before strike aircraft arrive. It does not drop bombs. It creates the conditions under which bombs can be dropped safely. The E-2D Hawkeye is the airborne command post, a propeller-driven aircraft with a massive radar dome that can see everything in the sky for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. It coordinates the entire air battle, directing fighters, tracking threats, and ensuring that every aircraft in the wing knows exactly what every other aircraft is doing at every moment. Together, these platforms form a complete war-fighting ecosystem. And that ecosystem is now, as of this broadcast, within operational range of Iran. Beyond the carriers, the United States has deployed more than 120 additional military aircraft across bases in the broader Middle East region. Defense analysts have described this as the largest concentration of American air power in the region since the 2003 Iraq War. Patriot missile defense batteries and the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, THAAD, have been repositioned to protect American personnel and allied facilities from the ballistic missile strikes that Iran would likely launch in any conflict scenario. The command architecture for all of this sits at a regional air operations center in Qatar. From that facility, American commanders can coordinate every aircraft, every ship, and every missile defense battery across the entire theater simultaneously. It is the brain of the operation, and it has been operating continuously. The picture taken together is this: the United States has assembled a force that can strike, defend, sustain, coordinate, and endure. It is not a show of force for its own sake. It is a deployment that makes every option real. Iran cannot match the United States in conventional military terms. It has no aircraft carriers. Its Air Force flies aging aircraft, many of which date to before the 1979 revolution and have been maintained under decades of sanctions with limited access to spare parts and technology. In a direct conventional military exchange, the gap between American and Iranian air power is not close. Iran's military strategists have known this for decades, and so they have built a different kind of military, one designed not to defeat the United States in open battle, but to make the cost of any conflict too high to sustain. The cornerstone of this strategy is the ballistic missile program. Iran has developed and fielded a range of ballistic missiles with estimated ranges from approximately 500 kilometers on the lower end to as much as 2,000 kilometers in some reported configurations, according to open-source defense research and published estimates from non-proliferation institutes. What this means in practical terms is that Iranian missiles can reach American military bases across the Gulf, naval vessels in the Arabian Sea, and population centers and infrastructure across the broader region without Iranian aircraft ever leaving the ground. These missiles are not precision weapons in the way that American munitions are, but quantity has its own quality. In a conflict scenario, Iran would not fire one missile. It would fire salvos, dozens or hundreds of missiles aimed at multiple targets simultaneously, with the goal of overwhelming missile defense systems through sheer volume. Iran has also invested heavily in drone technology. Unmanned aerial vehicles that are inexpensive to produce can be launched in large numbers and are difficult to intercept at scale. Individually, a single Iranian drone is not a major threat to a sophisticated military, but a swarm of 50 or 100 drones launched simultaneously can saturate and exhaust missile defense interceptors that cost orders of magnitude more than the drones themselves. The third leg of Iran's deterrence posture is its network of regional proxy forces. In Lebanon, Hezbollah maintains a large arsenal of rockets and missiles. In Yemen, Houthi forces have demonstrated the ability to strike targets hundreds of kilometers away using drones and ballistic missiles. In Iraq and Syria, Iranian-backed militia groups can threaten American personnel and allied forces. This network means that if Iran is attacked, the response does not have to come from Iranian territory. It can come from multiple directions simultaneously, making any military operation against Iran geometrically more complicated. However, Iran's defensive picture has notable weaknesses that defense analysts have highlighted. Researchers examining satellite imagery of sites around Tehran have noted a troubling discrepancy. Russian-made S-300 surface-to-air missile launcher systems appear to be deployed at known air defense positions, but the radar systems that are supposed to accompany and guide those launchers appear to be absent. Without functioning radars, the missile launchers are significantly less effective. They cannot independently acquire and track targets. The assessment from several analysts is that Iran's air defense capability around its most sensitive sites has been degraded, possibly substantially, leaving critical facilities more vulnerable to air attack than Iranian officials publicly acknowledge. Iran's diplomatic messaging reflects this internal complexity. Publicly, the government maintains two contradictory positions simultaneously. One voice says Iran wants a deal. It wants sanctions lifted. It wants economic relief. It is prepared to negotiate seriously on the nuclear file. Another voice says that any military strike will be met with a response so severe and wide-ranging that the attacking party will regret initiating it. Both of these messages are being delivered at the same time to the same audience. The tension between them tells you something about the internal debate happening inside Tehran. To understand what the Iranian government is doing externally, you have to understand what it is managing internally, because the Iranian state is not only preparing for a potential confrontation with the United States and its allies, it is simultaneously trying to contain a domestic crisis that has not gone away. Reports from opposition media networks, regional journalists, and human rights monitoring organizations describe an Iranian security apparatus that has been placed on heightened alert, not only against foreign threats, but against its own population. According to these reports, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has repositioned security forces into urban areas and has been using civilian facilities as staging and concentration points for riot control equipment. The Nagsh-e-Jahan Stadium in the city of Isfahan, the home ground of one of Iran's most prominent football clubs, was reportedly used as a holding area for water cannon vehicles, security motorcycles, and special unit equipment. A match scheduled to be played at the stadium was reportedly postponed by 1 day, specifically to allow this security deployment to be cleared before fans arrived. This specific claim has not been independently verified by international press organizations, but it is consistent with patterns that have been documented at other facilities during previous periods of unrest. Reports also describe IRGC commanders and personnel conducting coordination meetings inside medical facilities in Tehran. If accurate, this practice reflects a deliberate strategy of locating command and control functions within buildings that carry legal protections under international humanitarian law, specifically hospitals and medical centers, which are generally protected from military attack under the laws of armed conflict. At the civilian level, the signs of preparation are quieter but equally telling. Social media users inside Iran have shared photographs and videos showing residents applying adhesive tape to their windows in a grid pattern, a basic civil defense measure designed to hold glass together in the event of a nearby explosion and reduce the risk of shrapnel injuries. This is not panic, it is preparation. And preparation of this kind happens when people believe, based on the information available to them, that the risk of an attack is real and near. There are also consistent reports of increased purchasing at supermarkets and supply stores, people stocking up on food, water, medicine, and essential household goods. Again, this is not mass hysteria. It is a rational response to a perceived threat, and it is happening at scale in multiple Iranian cities simultaneously. Against this backdrop of security mobilization and civilian preparation, the protest movement that the Iranian government hoped it had suppressed has returned to the streets. University campuses have become the epicenter of renewed activity. Students gathering to mark the 40th day since deaths during the January protest wave, a mourning interval that holds deep significance in Islamic tradition and has historically served as a recurring focal point for demonstrations, have clashed with besieged militia members and government-aligned student groups at multiple institutions. Specific incidents have been reported at Sharif University of Technology, one of Iran's most prestigious engineering institutions, where students held a memorial ceremony and were confronted by Basij forces. Similar confrontations occurred at Amir Kabir University of Technology and at least 2 other campuses in the capital. In one reported incident, students on a central Tehran street near a university blocked traffic and chanted phrases of solidarity and defiance. The president of one of the affected universities responded publicly by announcing that the university would not move to online learning, a statement that reveals the government's awareness that online learning would effectively shut down the physical campus gatherings that are sustaining the protest movement. The question of how many people have died as a result of the crackdown on protests in Iran is one of the most contested factual questions in this story. The American government has cited a figure of approximately 32,000 people killed during the suppression of protests. And the Iranian government has published its own accounting of approximately 3,100 total fatalities, including approximately 200 members of the security forces, presenting this figure as evidence of measured and proportional response. Independent human rights organizations and journalists have been unable to verify either figure because access to the relevant information inside Iran is severely restricted. What is documentable is that the gap between these two numbers is enormous. And that gap is itself a weapon wielded by both sides in the information war that is running parallel to every other dimension of this conflict. Military force and diplomatic pressure are 2 instruments of the American strategy. But there is a third instrument that receives less attention and may ultimately prove more consequential: economic pressure. Iran's economy has been operating under significant international sanctions for years. Those sanctions have restricted Iran's access to international financial systems, limited its ability to sell oil on global markets, and constrained its capacity to import goods and technology. Despite these restrictions, Iran has maintained a level of oil exports, primarily to China, that has provided the government with enough revenue to continue funding its military, its proxy network, and its domestic security apparatus. The current American strategy includes a reported intensification of pressure specifically targeting this oil revenue stream. The goal is to reduce or eliminate the flow of Iranian crude to Chinese buyers, the primary remaining market for Iranian oil, by threatening secondary sanctions against any entity that purchases Iranian oil in violation of American sanctions law. If successful, this approach would cut off one of the Iranian government's primary sources of hard currency at precisely the moment when it needs maximum resources to manage both external pressure and internal unrest. The strategic logic is clear. An Iranian government that cannot pay its soldiers, cannot fund its proxies, and cannot maintain the economic transfers that sustain public tolerance of the regime is a government under a qualitatively different kind of pressure than one that simply faces the threat of airstrikes. Military strikes can be survived and even, in some narratives, turned into a rallying point for national unity. Economic collapse is harder to spin. We have now walked through every dimension of this situation: the military hardware, the missile arsenals, the internal protests, the diplomatic timelines, and the economic pressure campaign. Let me bring it together for you now with the honest, clear-eyed assessment that this story demands. Two American aircraft carriers in the same operational theater do not automatically mean that a military strike is imminent or inevitable. Carriers are instruments of leverage as much as they are instruments of destruction. Their presence in the region changes what is possible, and changing what is possible changes what every actor in this situation believes they can or cannot afford to do. That is the point. It has always been the point. But here is what experience and history also tell us. When this much military force concentrates in a single region, the margin for error shrinks. The space between an accident and an incident, between an incident and a crisis, and between a crisis and a conflict, that space gets smaller. A navigation error, a miscommunication between military channels, a protest that becomes a riot, that becomes a government decision to demonstrate strength at exactly the wrong moment. These are not hypothetical risks. They are the documented causes of wars that nobody intended to start. Tonight, the region is compressed. The forces are positioned. The diplomacy is still moving, but moving against a deadline. And for the millions of ordinary people living inside this story, the families in Tehran taping their windows, the students on campuses choosing between silence and speaking, the sailors on ships in the Arabian Sea, the residents across the Gulf states watching radar screens and news feeds, for all of them, the weight of this moment is not abstract. It is the sound of a quiet evening that might not stay quiet. We will continue to follow this story and bring you verified, factual reporting as the situation develops. We will not tell you what to feel. We will tell you what is happening, and we will trust you to draw your own conclusions. For now, this is your correspondent reporting from the region. Stay informed, stay grounded, and stay safe.